Well, it's Grandpa Ricky. And it's a Saturday, and my sweetie's away in Arizona, and I'm here by myself, and I'm frightened. This virus is a game changer. Whether or not it's been manipulated by any government or whatever it is, but to have so many people scared and so many people changing their behavior is a really big deal. My friend Paul told me that global pollution is shrinking. My friend Andrea told me that the shelves of the Whole Foods store in New York City that her daughter goes to were all empty. When people come to visit me, we sit outside. We were sitting out with umbrellas rather than going in the house. Someone who's very important to me by the name of Kevin in Hong Kong told me that everyone is wearing masks and gloves, and they're doing it not for their own protection, but in case they're protected, in case they're infected for other people. And then I was talking to my friend Andrea, and we were talking about what is it that helps keep us from being afraid or from being incapacitated. And we came to the conclusion, and for us, for she and I don't know what it is for you, it's human contact. And she talked about somebody by the name of Renee Brown, who was talking about the importance of having a soft belly and a firm back. And what does that mean? It means being vulnerable with how we're feeling, but also being strong enough to reach out and talk about it with somebody else. And then that reminded me of a piece of research that somebody had shown me that when people were having suicidal thoughts, the thing that really helped was that when they could realize that somebody cared. Didn't work all the time, but it worked a whole lot. And then I thought about how lonely I was as a child and how I felt that nobody really knew who I was. And it was crazy making, really crazy making. And then my third ex-wife, her father was a colonel in the American Army, and he'd gone away to war as a very sensitive guy and come back really crazed. The Army eventually had to get rid of him after many years of service because he was falling apart. He was drinking and doing crazy things. And when he went to one particular doctor much later in his life, at a VA hospital, the psychiatrist in the VA hospital talked to him for over 10 hours straight. And he just said, "Tell me about your life." And out came all this outpouring. And he was a changed man after that. He's still agonized, but I think his agony was less. And when he was dying, he told me that had really helped him a lot. And I listened to that because I knew this guy had suffered a great deal and had done amazing things with his life. After the Army drummed him out of the service, he was very instrumental in helping schools get integrated. He ran their busing system, and it was a crazy job, but he did it really well. He was a good man. And he had his problems, like all of us. And then talking with Andrea, I was reminded of one of my heroes who was an educator in Australia. And she was away in the outback, and there were no books, there was no money. Kids were living in abject poverty and lots of problems, violence at home, all kinds of crazy behavior. And what she found was that she found some people who could read and who could print. And so she got the kids to tell these people stories, and they made handmade books because there was no library there. And the kids were reading each other's stories about how last night, Daddy beat Mummy up, and, this happened and that happened. And it was the tragedy of their lives that these kids were pouring out. And when I read that, I read it before I was a teacher, and I started doing that with my students. Every day, the kids would write something, their journals. And I told them that, I said I wouldn't read them. They could write whatever they wanted to. And then gradually, as they trusted me and I trusted them, I said, does anybody want to read from their journal? And then they started reading these stories. And it was amazingly healing for these kids to stand up and read something about their life. And then I met Ayla Schutz, who was the widow of a real innovator by the name of Will Schutz. And Will had invented something he and Aylish invented something they called the Lifeline. And I did it with Aylish years later. And it was getting a big piece of paper and drawing a line from when I was born to right now. And then drawing a little line and then writing a story about all the significant things that had happened to me in my life. And then I partnered up in this group with an African-American psychiatrist, and she read me her story and I read her my story. And it was transformational. And I've subsequently done other ones where I go back and my ancestors' stories. And there's something in this about sharing stories. And then Andrea said that one of her teachers, a psychoanalyst by the name of Bryce something, had so many people trying to get to him. He was in charge of treating soldiers who'd been shocked after World War II. And there were just too many soldiers. And so what he said to them was, he said, please, I can't see you. There's just such a waiting list. Please write your story and in a letter and mail it to me. And what he found was that even the fact that they didn't even know if he was going to be able to read their letter, he wrote that them writing the letter got the pain and suffering moving out of them. And so I hope that we can do something like that. I'm hoping that we can start listening to one another and sharing stories and making videos and podcasts and all these media things, and then we can hear each other's stories. Because I think it really helps when we talk about the things that helped us and talk about the problems we have. And I am finding that making these videos is enormously freeing for me. And I discovered I'm not making them just so you can listen to them. I'm making them because I want to get the suffering and the good stuff out of me. I want to share myself. And there's very little way that we can help one another. And even, I'm what do they call us? White Anglo-Saxon Protestant. I'm a white guy, privileged because I'm white. I'm Scottish on all sides. And Scottish people in the past have been very dour, very taciturn, very contained. Don't let anybody know you're suffering. We'll get through, where everything's fine. And this whole idea of being vulnerable and sharing how we're frightened right now. Everybody who I think has half a brain, is frightened right now. And one thing that I found really helped, and this may sound a little strange, is there's a process that I learned from an organization in Lafayette, California. I forget the name of it, but it's called mock-ups. And the idea is like this old shamanic thing, run at your fears. And so the idea is you call out, you make worst case scenarios, and then after each one you say, that's a story that doesn't need to happen, that's a story that doesn't need to happen. And so you're bringing your fear from your brain stem up into your brain. And so I started watching movies on the internet about pandemics. And boy, there's some neat movies out there. A couple of the stories were true. And I just saw such examples of acts of heroism. And how when people work together, then we can avert these disasters. And I'm having to go against my heritage of silence and constriction and hiding and holding everything in to being vulnerable and standing up and saying, this is where I'm at, where are you at? Anyway, this is a long rambling video, and I hope that you found it useful. There was something else I wanted to say, and that is, when we can start conversation with strangers and say, hey, this is what I'm feeling vulnerable about today. What are you feeling vulnerable about today? And to find some humor and curiosity and share the fact that, yep, we're vulnerable and we're firm. We've got a firm back. We're turning up. We're doing life-affirming actions. So I hope you found this interesting, and I really encourage you to get out there. Take the lid off. What have you got to lose? You might make some new friends. And boy, in this age, we need new friends. Because I haven't gone out for days. And because I've been lucky enough to be useful to people and have friends and know a little bit how to laugh about life and, to give good energy, then people are giving me good energy. So people are bringing me food and using the internet and interacting on all these different platforms. So I do hope that you're doing okay. And it's a time where we all have to do something new. We've got to borrow technologies from other people unabashedly. And we've got to ask each other for help. Because you can't get through this stuff alone now. It's much bigger. Okay, there's an old thing about, everything is an opportunity. And Viktor Frankl, I challenge you to look him up. May some good come of this crisis. Okay? So thank you very much. Bye-bye.